And what happens to the righteous angels then? They enter into a richly deserved retirement program. Their work's done. Because the rulership of the world is turned over to glorified people, Old Testament saints resurrected, Christian saints resurrected, raptured, thus glorified. And that's Revelation 20 verse 4. We shall rule and reign with Christ 1,000 years. We will rule and reign with Him as what? As kings and priests. Now, we'll be what kind of kings? Davidic kings under Jesus. What kind of priests? Melchizedekian priests, not Aaronic ones. Under Jesus, the Melchizedekian high priest. And friends, the priesthood is a fascinating and again a difficult subject for Christians to understand, because we don't understand what a distinctive Israelite priesthood really was for and how it's going to function again in the kingdom age. So let's take a look. Remember, God said to Abraham, through you shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. And that's going to be through Israel, that will be completely under the leadership of first Moses, then Joshua, then the judges, and finally the kingmaker Samuel, and then David after Saul failed. Okay? And the Davidic line of kings collapsed at the Babylonian captivity and has never been restored to this day. And the next king that sits on the throne in Jerusalem will be who? Jesus Christ Himself, the ultimate Son of David. Now, along with the kingly line would be the priests. And who was the first priest? High priest? Okay, watch. Here we go, friends. A descendant of Levi named Aaron. And Aaron had 4 sons. 2 were killed by God, and the next 2, Eleazar and Ithamar, then sort of took over. But it was to this line, not that one, that God gave the priestly promise, because his son Phinehas stood for God in a time of national crisis. And so God gave to Phinehas the blessing, the provision of an everlasting priesthood. Phinehas. Okay? Now, when David then took over the throne after Saul, there was a conflict between which line of priest is in charge here. Is it this line here? See, Abiathar followed David everywhere he wandered, running away from Saul. But when the final crunch came as to which line is taking over, Abiathar rebelled against David and joined against David's son Solomon, and joined in the insurrection of Adonijah, see, and was deposed as high priest. Okay, not killed, deposed, set aside. Interesting, Jeremiah was one of his descendants. Okay? But the true line of priests now took over under whom? Zadok. Okay. Now, you know, you ask, this is big stuff for God. I mean, He's got this all worked out, all written out, all described, and you have to ask yourself, in all humility, how many Christians really understand this kind of thing? It gets very complicated. And you know, the average Christian says, well, I don't care about it. Forget it, because I'm only interested in the church. See? That's not right. That is not the way God wants us to think about His Word. God is interested in Zadok. Well, when the Babylonian captivity came, guess who came back from Babylon under Zerubbabel the governor? Joshua the high priest, a descendant of Zadok, and reestablished within minutes the animal sacrifices on the ruins of the former temple in Jerusalem. And the theocracy began again with animal sacrifices under a legitimate priesthood. And that went down all the way down here to the time of Onias III, who was deposed in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, in the time of the colossal tragedies that happened then. And a false line took over, who were ruling the temple when Jesus came under Annas and Caiaphas. You remember those villains? Well, they were in the wrong line. They were apostates. They were illegitimate, but Jesus, tolerated them. He didn't wipe them out. That'll happen at the second coming. But false priests took over the temple, 170 BC. Okay? Now, when the millennium comes, however, see, when Christ the Melchizedekian high priest, foreshadowed by Melchizedek 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago in Psalm 110 it says, "Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." He's not an Aaronic priest, he's a Melchizedekian one, which means he lives forever, he's never replaced by anybody, he has no sin. Totally different system. And when the millennium comes, he will be the Melchizedekian high priest and will be the Melchizedekian subordinate priest under Christ for 1,000 years. Now, you have to think about that, because that's what you will be. You say, I don't want anything in the Bible except what affects me. Well, you will be a what? A Melchizedekian sub-priest for 1,000 years. You better plan it now. Count on it. Are you ready? No response. Right. At the rapture, we'll be ready. And Pastor McCrum will be a Melchizedekian sub-priest beginning when? At the rapture? No, at the beginning of the what? The kingdom, 7 years later. If the rapture is tonight, in 7 years...
I'll be glorified. I'll be ready.
Yes. If the rapture is tonight, Pastor McCrum will be glorified and ready, and that 7 years later he will become, for 1,000 years, a Melchizedekian sub-priest under Jesus, as well as a Davidic sub-king. Please get his autograph afterwards. Well, here's the amazing thing. All Christian women will be subordinate Melchizedekian priests. Amazing. I mean, think of this, how vastly different this is from the what? Aaronic system, see, which will be completely replaced by another program when Jesus takes over, and he's not an Aaronic priest. Hebrews makes a big point of that in chapter 7, etc., right? He's not of that, he's of a different tribe. He did not come from Levi, but from Judah. Okay? Now, so Zadokian priests will serve in the millennial temple, but only Christ will be the high priest. And of all the details we're going to study in Ezekiel 40 to 48, with intricate explanations of what will happen in the sacrificial system for 1,000 years after Jesus comes, no high priest is mentioned functioning in the temple on the earth at all. Now that is incredible. And the answer is because there won't be any Aaronic high priest anymore. He will be replaced by Jesus, who comes from a different line of high priests, of which there's only one member, himself. Okay? So you see how important this is to God? You say, well, you mean there's going to be a temple established in Jerusalem where everybody in the world has to come to worship the Lord? Well, friends, yes. Look at this. Look how important the temple system is to God. You first start off with what? The tabernacle, just a movable tent, okay? But it had more things in it than any later temple ever had. It had what? Inside the Ark of the Covenant, which was under the mercy seat, which was in the Holy of Holies. It had what inside the Ark? 3 things. Okay, Aaron's rod that budded, the golden pot of manna, and, most important, the law written with the finger of God on 2 tablets of stone. Okay? Well, when the tabernacle was taken, to the Holy Land and set up there in Shiloh, the whole thing collapsed. It was under the Ithamar line, and it was desecrated, you remember, by Hophni and Phinehas, wicked priests at the time when young Samuel was there. Remember, his mother gave her boy to the tabernacle. Well, finally the whole thing collapsed, and the ark was taken captive by the Philistines and paraded around for 7 months in their kingdom. I mean, it was an absolute disgrace to the glory and holiness of God. Imagine this thing. But God rescued his ark. Amazing. He himself did it. And finally, David said, I want to build a house that is